What's going on there, guys? Good afternoon. It's the Earthmaster here on this Tuesday, August 30th, 2022, about 12:15 p.m. California time. Got a 3.7 earthquake showing up in the South America region. Looks like right around the Chile area. Seen quite a bit of movement ramping up overnight along the South America region, Middle America Trench, West Coast. All this activity along with a pretty large earthquake down here in the Pacific-Antarctic Ridge. Had a 6.3 come in here. Before we get to the earthquake activity, I do want to check out another long-duration solar flare from the bad boy 3088, which is now way over on the southwestern limb. Although we can still see the effects of the flare because of the amount of energy and the explosions that's taken place with this solar flare activity from 3088, rising quite nicely off of the sun's surface there, so to speak. So even though it's way over there, we're still able to observe these massive flares that 3088 is producing. Right now, we're currently looking at looks like an M1.9, actually M2.0. Again, this is a long duration M flare. Notice this feature right here, kind of taking its time to peak out. I believe we have peaked out at the M2.0 threshold, as noted on here for the current. But notice how drawn out this is. Very long duration C flare, or M flare, excuse me, that 3088 is producing, and any subsequent CME is definitely directed away from the Earth. This will not be geo-effective whatsoever, but we are getting the effects of the solar flare. It only takes a couple minutes for that energy to reach the Earth in terms of the solar flare activity and the radio blackouts that happen with that flaring. And right now the DRAP map showing the high frequency radio blackout centered over the sunlit side of the Earth. Looks like right off the coast of Mexico into the kind of off there into the Pacific Ocean a little bit. So that's continuing. A lot of M flare activity has happened over the last week. I will try to see if I can come up with a tally. There's been a bunch of them. I'm guessing right around 20 M flares, and most of them have been produced from 3088. Now the solar sunspot that is facing us, and the one that we're kind of watching, it's got a bullseye shot right now at us, is 3089. It is still showing some complex magnetic fields here, and that does harbor a threat as we well, as it is facing us. Anything that does pop off will be Earth directed and geo-effective if we get a CME. Right now it does hold a beta delta class. Looks like remaining at 65% chance for a C flare, 25 for M, and 10% threat for an X flare. Now this thing did produce an M7.2 and an M5.3 and a couple other smaller ones as well that's not listed up here, but the noteworthy events have been listed. And this was back a couple days ago, about 4 days ago, when it was on the southeastern limb of the sun. It was just kind of turning into view. So right now, as it's sitting here, looking at us, staring us in the eye, it's really not producing anything like 3088 has been. That has been the bad boy that's been pretty active in the past week. And this guy, like I say, it's got potential, but right now it's just kind of staying kind of neutral. No major flare threat, or at least no major flares currently from this sunspot, but we still have the overall threat from this region. We also do have a coronal hole that is facing us, or will be facing us here pretty soon. This is the latest imagery from the SDO folks. It's a pretty massive coronal hole, and it is centered right around the center portion of the sun, so that will give us a direct bullseye shot from the coronal hole, which will produce a chance for some geomagnetic unrest here from this high-speed solar wind stream that is flowing from this area on the sun. And then not to mention any flares that could possibly produce from these other sunspots that are Earth-directed. 3089, I think, poses the most likely threat far as these two go. There's a couple new developments. Let me see, bring up the latest imagery. a couple newer sunspots trying to form over here on the eastern side of the sun, but not looking super fancy right now as far as any major threats go. But we'll watch it in the coming days. For now, we'll focus on these two sunspots and the bad boy 3088, which is disappearing but still making itself known. All right, right now 3-day geomagnetic forecast calls for just pretty much calm conditions here. We did have a little bit of elevated KP index, seen some auroras at the higher latitudes last night up into the Canada region, peaked out around the KP index at 4, but overall things kind of calming down currently. All right, earthquake activity. That's another story. Things have been ramping up pretty nicely here along the eastern Pacific here, and also around the South America region. This here is the Nazca Plate that is right up against the South America region here. It's a major subduction zone. Seen a lot of seismic increase in pressure up along this entire area. We're getting that teeter-totter effect that I speak of quite a bit, and it's in full force here along these plate boundaries. We did have a 6.3 earthquake come into the Pacific-Antarctica boundary, the ridge down here. That came in about 3 o'clock in the morning. I wasn't up that time, so I couldn't do an update on it. That was, looks like it was preceded by a 5.5 about an hour earlier. So definitely a lot of strain being built up here, or being kicked up here in this region. Although this area does see quite a bit of movement. Let me show you guys here real quick the regional overview and historical map. Since about 1900 to 2015, it does see quite a few earthquakes, and they do get up there in the 5 and the occasional 6 range. But it's been a while. I have to say, it's actually been a little while since I've seen any major earthquake activity down there in that region. So that seems to have set into motion quite a bit of activity up here around Alaska, West Coast, and again areas here on the adjacent plate boundaries of the Nazca and the Cocos Plate here, this little small one up against the Middle America Trench. So for this area, the Middle America Trench did see some movement this morning, and this activity following that 6.3 down south. 4.2, 4.4 into the Middle America Trench, just off the coast of Guatemala. Down here in the South America region, getting quite a bit of activity as well. Some of this looks like it was prior from yesterday, but the two earthquakes that did strike after the 6.3, we got one deep one, a 4.2 at 270 kilometers here into the Peru-Chile Trench, and also a 4.4 up here along this plate boundary between the Nazca and the Cocos Plate here. Cocos Plate. The West Coast, well, let's check out Puerto Rico. This thing's kind of lighting up as well up here within the last hour. It got a 3.3. Pretty close to the Puerto Rico Trench. Looks like about 16 kilometers deep. Aside from that, looks like about 7 earthquakes. That's not that big of a deal here for the Puerto Rico area. All right, states. Got things ramping up out here. This is a 2.5 map, and above a 3.9 earthquake struck the Mina, Nevada area. Now, this is just outside of the Tonopah region. This area is the region that's seen that 6-pointer back in 2019, and it's a swarm, earthquake swarm, and aftershock sequence in one that's been occurring for quite a while. Now, I'd say over the past 3 weeks or so, things have been kind of mellow here in terms of our typical movement. Normally we see a pretty good line of activity, and the 30-day map will show you that. But we really haven't seen a lot of recent activity here around the Mina, Nevada area. This is the last 30 days, but we're talking about last 2 or 3 weeks or so of activity has been relatively quiet. So we've seen a 3.9 kick up in this swarm area, in this aftershock sequence area from the 6.0 that struck in 2019. So that's given me a pretty good indication here that we got quite a bit of built up pressure moving inland here from these plate boundaries, the Pacific Plate and the North American Plate. And it's hitting these spots that have seen prior earthquakes in years past. And that includes the Mina, Nevada area. I wouldn't doubt it, though, that we start to see a little activity around the Ridgecrest region. That's also been another very quiet zone. Of course, this was hit with some earthquakes as well back in, what year was that? Was it 2019? 2018? Can't remember exactly. But yeah, I think it was 2019. There was a whole lot happening back in that year. But this region has been relatively quiet. Not a whole lot of aftershock sequences. So when we see these areas fill in, so to speak, of movement, that's a good sign to watch areas along the plate boundary itself. And of course inland, where all that pressure is kind of trying to squeeze into. We're starting to see the swarming activity kick up against the mountain range here around Cedar, Utah as well. It's normally a good indicator of a lot of pressure being built up here along the Intermountain West regions, right up against the Rocky Mountain areas. And Yellowstone, by the way, is continuing its swarming activity into day number 6. Is that right? I think day number 6 of earthquake swarming. Still continuing right there, folks. And it doesn't look as active, at least I would say late overnight time frame. We had a little period of some quietness, but it looks like this morning and this early afternoon time frame, it's getting pretty busy. Overnight, like I said, kind of a little lull in activity, but we're starting to see things kick back up there on this earthquake swarm that's, like I said, been ongoing here for about 5 or 6 days now. And these are not big earthquakes, but they are part of an earthquake swarm that's been going on. And looking at the USGS map here, looks like they're filling in some of these earthquakes. It looks like they got to a couple of them. But remember, there's a lot more than 10 earthquakes listed here on this map that you guys see over the last 24 hours. So they're probably only counting these discrete ones that they can localize, generally find their location easily and the correct magnitude. But remember, all these other little spikes here that you see on the map or on the graph here, those are all earthquakes as well. So you can probably take that 10 and multiply it by 5. And that's just today's. And far as them reporting over the last 7 days, far as the total tally goes, it looks like they're starting to squeeze some of them in there. I know it does take them a little while to go back and look at all these, but it looks like they're filling them in quite a bit now. 171 or 165 earthquakes within this area, but I don't think they got to all of them. Like I said, there's quite a few smaller ones that they're not counting in that mix there. So, and the largest sequence so far, I believe, is a couple 3s, low-grade 3s, and mostly 2s and 1s, and some smaller microquakes. Again, this activity still continuing as we speak. One earthquake over here outside the swarm near Mammoth, got a 2.0, just outside of the Lake Yellowstone area. And I strictly believe that these are fault related and pressure related here with the ongoing movement and the overall regional seismic activity here along the western portion of the states. Not volcanic far as uplift or magma intrusion goes. These are all, this area does see quite a bit of earthquake activity, folks. And that's all, a lot of it's related to the pressure and the fault systems out here. Let's see what we got for Northern California. One earthquake outside of Mount Shasta, 1.0. A little at the southern base there, it looks like, near the McLeod area. The rest of the state here, one earthquake off the coast of the Eureka area. This one coming in, looks like overnight, about 17 kilometers deep here, at the very, very southern end of the Cascadia megathrust here. 2.9. We have been seeing a little bit of activity within this area over the last week or so, including the ongoing tremor activity. There's the movement over the last week, the all magnitudes area, or all magnitudes map, I should say. So things definitely been heightened up here along the west coast, and just these spotty areas that are seeing some increasing movement. Further down south, a little activity along this plate boundary known as the San Andreas Fault at 1.2 near the Point Arena area. Some movement outside of San Francisco as well, near Pacifica, and a little movement along the creeping section. Not a whole lot today, just a couple small microquakes. Southern California, aside from this 3-pointer, or 4-pointer, it looks like it got upgraded. This earthquake struck looks like a couple hours following that 6.3 down south. So I think if anything, that 6.3 and this movement down into the Pacific-Antarctic Ridge would definitely make sense here with the overall nudge, so to speak, that it created for the Pacific Plate. We are kind of blocked right now, kind of locked over here along the western Pacific. And no doubt it's building up pressure, but the majority of the earthquake activity and the steam, so to speak, the momentum is along this area here of the North American Plate, South American region. And looks like Alaska's getting pretty active up here as well into the subduction zone. Got a couple earthquakes here. Looks like one struck last night and a couple other earthquakes here just earlier this morning, 4.2 and a 3.9. This one here pretty deep though, into the subduction zone, about 42 kilometers there. But the Pacific Plate in general, the west of it, is pretty darn quiet, folks. When you look over to the western Pacific side, back to Southern California real quick. San Jacinto Fault Zone definitely showing some activity. Looks like a lot more movement today than what we've seen yesterday. Outside of the Borrego Springs area. And got a couple swarming earthquakes there. All very small microquakes, but still a noticeable increase in movement today. Looks like in Southern California as far as microquake activity goes. The rest of the country, Texas, Oklahoma, you got a couple spotty earthquakes. A lot of times when we see these earthquakes out here along the west coast, start building up some pressure and seeing these earthquakes hit in these areas that have seen larger earthquakes in the past. Regionally, it's an overall sign of some increasing pressure, obviously, in this area. And a lot of times we'll see these oil fields get hit, these injection well regions. There was a 2.6 and a 0.9 that kind of struck this morning time frame. And let's see what we got out here. I believe we do have some... there's a couple... Let's see what we got. Looks like there's some older operations out here kind of getting covered up from the... it's hard to tell if that's one or not. There's definitely one right here. So it's within an area that's definitely seen some pumping operations and some injection well processes going on there in Oklahoma. So a lot of times those areas do get hit as the pressure kind of makes its way across the country, so to speak. The eastern part of the country here has not been hit yet. It's been awfully quiet here for about a week. Haven't seen any further activity into the South Carolina region around Elgin, or anywhere for that matter along the eastern portion of the country. The big island of Hawaii, most of the activity today around the Pahala area, although we are getting some movement up around Mauna Loa. Just mostly microquake activity, it looks like. They did have a 2.7 yesterday. But overall, things just kind of a little spotty up there. No major swarms to report in the area of the Mauna Loa region. In fact, all volcanoes still up here as normal. Of course, you got Kilauea volcano, right? Continuing to do the eruptive stage that it's been doing for a little while. And I'm sure most of the activity is confined to the crater. So let's go ahead and check that out real quick and see what we got for the latest update here on the eruptive stage of Kilauea volcano. See, it's continued over the past 24 hours. You can literally add months onto that. All recent eruptive activity has been confined to the crater. No significant changes have been observed at the summit or in either rift zone. So this is an ongoing event continuing. Overflight measurements from August 16th indicated that the crater floor has seen a total rise of about 137 meters, 449 feet, and that 104 million cubic meters of lava. Holy smokes, 27 billion gallons of lava has been effused since the beginning of this eruption, which started back September 29th of last year. Isn't that crazy? That's a lot of lava. So, and that's a lot of feet built up, 449 feet. Wow. I would love to go out there and check that out. That'd kind of be pretty cool to see, right? Firsthand, I think, anyway. But so yeah, things still continuing there. No major changes noted at the volcanoes there on the Big Island. Let's see. Again, Western Pacific, awfully quiet. Some of this activity, let's get rid of this here. Some of this activity that we're seeing listed here on the map. At least one of those is old, the 4.4, that deeper one. We have seen a little bit of further activity this morning, just a couple fours around this region. And most of it is deeper activity into the subduction zones and the trenches. Philippine Plate looks awfully quiet. Not a whole lot going on. I have seen a little bit of increase in activity over here around the Arabian Sea. Northern portion here of the region. A 5.3 that struck. This one that was this morning, it looks like. Near the Carlsberg Ridge at about 10 kilometers. That's the default level. And a little bit further up north as well, seeing a 4.5. So overall, a little bit of seismic increase in pressure happening. It seems following that movement this morning, that 6.3. You got to remember the Pacific Plate is a big, bad plate. And a little bit of nudge here, a little bit of movement there can definitely affect areas thousands of miles away. And got to remember the westward pressure or northwestern pressure movement with the Pacific Plate here kind of puts a strain in this region. And overall, though, it's definitely been pretty active here along this area. We'll definitely keep an eye on it. Let's see what else we got. I did receive back a email from the HVO folks here in regards to the if you missed my update last night, I was trying to get a hold of him in regards to the newly installed seismic stations there at the Tau Island volcanoes in the American Samoa. I do want to be able to access that publicly available information, and this is the email that they quickly followed up with. This is from the HVO folks there, Hawaiian Volcano Observatory, which monitor the Tau volcano in the American Samoa. It says, thank you for your email and interest in the American Samoa activity. The data for the broadband seismic stations is not yet available online. We're working on it now, but running into some unexpected issues that we hope to have resolved soon. We're sorry for the delay and inconvenience. We hope to have that data available soon. Best wishes, guys. So I'll be waiting. I'll probably send them an email back here pretty soon. I'll give them a week or two, see if they can get those working, because I do want to be able to look at those and continue to monitor the seismic activity at the American Samoa Tau volcano with the ongoing earthquake swarm now that's been happening here for a few weeks. Waiting to see what's going to happen down there. Eventually I think something's going to happen. So it's good to monitor that activity. All right, guys, I am going to bounce out of here. Again, definitely a couple regions to watch pretty closely up here along the Pacific Plate and these adjacent plate areas with these subduction zones. A lot of activity showing up here in the South America region as far as 2s and 3s go. A couple 4s in there as well, but you got to watch these swarms. Sometimes they can lead up to much bigger earthquake activity. All right, guys, I'm going to bounce out of here. I got another busy day. Got a lot of schoolwork and whatnot to do. And we will chat you guys a little bit later on. And again, if something big happens or changes, I will be back here to do an update and review. So have a good day, folks. Stay cool. We'll chat you guys a little bit later on. Peace out.